Hello, welcome back. Let's start today's episode with a question that is sort of tangential, but I'm personally curious. Have you ever been to space camp? And if so, how much of what they teach kids or adults do you think actually applies for people who get up there in orbit? That's Matt behind the camera. We've got Noel working on audio as we speak. Agent Scully is being creepy at a coffee shop. I'm Ben, and you're you, the most important part of this show. That makes this stuff they don't want you to know. This week, Matt, Noel, and I are taking a closer look at a topic we have explored in the past: space. But we're not going there alone. Instead, we're joining numerous government agencies, spy agencies, and private entities to see what exactly they're doing up there. Because there's a lot more going on in orbit above your head as you watch this than you might suspect by just glancing up. And it ties into espionage, militarization, really dangerous and nasty stuff. The concept of war in space is not new by any means. In the 1950s, the US was already experimenting with anti-satellite technology because they were convinced that the USSR, the Soviet side of the Cold War, was going to launch nukes into space. And in an exercise that some would call hypocritical, the US actually did test nuclear bombs in space on its own. Supposedly, that all stopped with the United Nations Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Notice that we say supposedly. Here are 5 secret space programs. Number 1. You've seen perhaps our earlier video on a formerly top secret surveillance satellite program by the US, working with the CIA and then later with the NRO. This was known as Corona. And Corona, just a quick and dirty summary, flew satellites with cameras across the Earth trying to take pictures, and the technology for taking pictures and communicating images at the time was such that the best they could do was literally drop negatives from space and send someone to pick them up. But there's another program that we didn't talk about in that earlier video, and that is the Soviet answer to the Corona satellites. They were called the Zenit. They are the most numerous satellite in human history. Over 500 of these things were flown, and to this day, the West is still not completely sure what the Soviets saw, when they saw it, or what they did with the things they found. 2. The NROL-45. This satellite is under the control of the National Reconnaissance Office, which is one of the strangest, most secretive offices in the US. The National Reconnaissance Office began in 1961, but it was classified for 3 decades. So classified, in fact, that government officials denied its existence in public. Uncle Sam finally admitted this agency existed in 1992, but admitting the existence and actually saying what an agency does are two very, very different things, especially in this country. The NROL-45 has the following publicly stated mission. Are you ready? To support national defense. What does that mean exactly? There is such a wide range of what that could mean. Let's hope it's not something that could result in a nuclear war in space, for instance, because they're flying multiple instances of this, and each time it seems to be more and more of a success. And before we get into accusations of alarmism, I do want to assure you that the mission of the NROL-45 is far, far more likely to be surveillance. We can say with a fair degree of certainty that this is some sort of surveillance technology rather than some James Bond villain-esque nuclear bomb. That leads us to number 3, guns in space. Imagine the physics of this, right? It's incredibly foolhardy to fire a gun in space. The Soviets did it. This came to light about a quarter of a century after the Cold War. We learned that in the 1970s, the USSR installed an R-23M car tech specially adapted from the aircraft weapon to work in space. It weighed about 37 pounds. It could fire thousands of shells per minute. This was a serious beast. 14.5 millimeter, could reputedly hit targets 2 miles away, and it was actually fired in 1975, not as a mission, but as a test. Luckily for space and human beings and the state of civilization, the Soviets, so far as everyone knows, did not continue this program. It was simply an experiment. Number 4, and we won't spend too much time on this because it irritates Matt, me, Noel, and it should irritate you as well. We did a video on it earlier, I believe, but here we go. X-37B. It's an autonomous spacecraft. It goes into orbit for a year at a time. No one knows what it's doing, and try as we may, we can't find anything but speculation. And then it lands, and then it goes up again. And we don't know how many times it's going to do this. We don't know where it's flying exactly, although there's some very, very clever self-taught sky watchers who are making amazing guesses at it. 5, the GSAP, the Geosynchronous Space Situational Awareness Program. Not a name that rolls off the tongue, admittedly, but something that has other countries and other space agencies very concerned. This proposed plan, with 4 satellites in total, or 4 Maine satellites from what we know about it, is built to go to other satellites, to monitor them, to maybe protect them, to maybe exploit information and hack them. At this point, people aren't entirely sure. It's imagined that the US government revealed this information due to some anti-satellite missile test by China. Now, of these 5 programs, several are historical and probably not in use today, the outdated satellites, for instance, but we also know that these 5 programs are barely skirting the surface. How do we know this? Because at this point, the sky is still not censored. You can go on to numerous forums today and find people who are watching the sky and seeing satellites that are not supposed to exist or not supposed to be doing what they are in fact doing. And the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 has some huge loopholes large enough for you and your entire family to walk through. It doesn't even define what a weapon is. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to learn more, check out our audio podcast at stufftheydon'twantyoutoKnow.com. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn more about stories we find that don't make it to the air, visit us on Facebook and Twitter, where we are Conspiracy Stuff. You can also send us a letter directly. All of our best suggestions for shows come from you. Not a general you, specifically you watching this. Let us know what we should cover next. You can email us directly. We are conspiracy@howstuffworks.com.